welcome to Comic Boom, the comics and education podcast. If you're interested in hearing more about the crossover between comics and education, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Lucy Starbuck-Bradley, and each week I'll be joined by a fellow educator, a librarian, an academic or a creator of comics to discuss their journey into comics and provide some inspiration to influence your practice. And hopefully shine some light on some titles you can bring into your libraries, your classrooms, and onto your bookshelves at home too. This episode of Comic Boom is sponsored by ALCS, the Authors Licensing and Collecting Society. Now, this episode is the second in a two-part special focusing on the Flying Eye title Detective Stanley and the Mystery at the Museum. In the first episode, we met the creators of the book themselves, Erica and Hannah. Go back and check that episode out if you missed it. It's the story of how the book came about, how they worked on it together. Well worth a listen. But in this episode, we're taking a peek behind the curtain to explore the different roles that collaborate on bringing books like Detective Stanley, Mystery at the Museum to our shelves. So today I am joined by the marketing, sales and editorial team who worked on that book from independent publishers Flying Eye. Very lucky to be joined by Faye Evans, editorial director, Kate Manning, head of sales, Hannah Kettle, head of marketing and publicity, and Helena Maratheftis, digital marketing coordinator, to talk about how all of those elements come together to work with the creative team to bring that book that we talked about last week to life. Just one thing to note, the sound on this episode is a little different just because we had the Flying Eye team all in one room around a mic. It's all good quality, you can absolutely hear them perfectly. But if you're into your audio, you might notice a slightly different sound than we usually have on Comic Boom, where we have just one person per mic. It sounds fantastic though, and they've got some great things to say. I found it fascinating to explore the industry behind the books that we read and to think about how that industry influences what we have access to and our reading preferences. Lots to think about, lots to explore. Here's what the Flying Eye team had to say. Hello, Flying Eye team. Welcome to Comic Boom.
Hi.
What a lovely chorus. A chorus of hellos. This is a record-breaking number of guests for Comic Boom, so thank you all for coming onto the podcast today. I'm going to start with Faye. So we've talked to the writer and illustrator Hannah and Erica of Detective Stanley, Mystery at the Museum, and I know from their side how their submission process went, but could you tell us a little bit about the process from your side? An email lands into the inbox with an idea for a book, and what are you looking for, and what is it that really piqued your interest about that proposal in particular?
Yeah, sure. So generally, I mean, we get submissions in a lot of different ways. We do have a submissions email. We go looking, we look on Instagram, we do lots and lots of different things to find books because we originate 99% of our stuff in-house. So we get it in a lot of different ways. But yeah, this was originally submitted by Hannah and Erica. And originally they'd made like an activity book for their children's schools. And it came into the inbox here. And Sam, who's our creative director and co-founder, he saw it, obviously saw how brilliant Stanley was. But we don't really do activity books here unless it's part of an already established series or established book itself. So,
like a spin-off type.
Exactly, that's right.
Scenario, yeah.
So he looked at it and went, this should be its own thing. And because Hannah and Erica are obviously both extremely talented and have both worked in writing and design and everything together and separately before, they were able to go away and come up with Detective Stanley and Mystery at the Museum.
In record time, I understand. They had like 3 weeks to do that.
Honestly, they are so speedy, but so brilliant at the exact same time, which is pretty rare, I think.
Yeah.
You know, because obviously genius takes time. But obviously they had Stanley on hand helping them out, our genius investigative king. So
yes.
Yeah, it was extremely quick and extremely cool. And yeah, that's how Stanley was born, and we signed them up for 3 books.
Yeah, they said that's really exciting. I'm interested in, so they said that it was kind of a piece of luck as well around it, like that there had been conversations going on that within the broader spectrum of titles at Flying Eye, there wasn't a detective series yet, and that was something you were kind of keeping your eyes out for. And I'm just interested in that kind of curation piece as well around the whole collection that you have, and because I know it's kind of notorious in publishing that people get turned down a lot before they find their right home for their book, and like so much of that is just not, I guess, a reflection on the quality of people's ideas, but on what the publisher happens to be looking for at that moment in time.
Absolutely. So much of publishing is truly right place, right time, right people. That's, I would say, the majority of it. In my experience, especially at a list like Flying Eye, which is not, hundreds and hundreds of titles a year, it's like 36 to 44, I think it is. That's very specific, titles a year. And that covers board books all the way through to YA. So that's obviously quite a lot within that. And that's fiction, non-fiction, picture books, etc. So the curation of that list is quite specific. Like, I wouldn't ever want to put two competing books against each other, together, for instance. Or sometimes we might not want to put two fairy books in the same year, or two wizardy books, or two actiony books, like in the same space in time, because obviously we're just cannibalizing that book's chance. So when we see projects like Detective Stanley, which is completely unique and wasn't going up against anything, that made it a lot easier, because we knew that we wouldn't have to wait. We knew that I wouldn't have to delay it, or we want to save this for another 6 months or so to, make the book. But we do have to kind of plan in advance to make sure that everybody gets their own space and is competing at the right time. So, it does happen a lot where we'll see stuff where we're like, oh, I really like that, but I already have a insert or insert topic book at that time. And it doesn't mean that, there are too many of that book or whatever. It simply means that at a smaller list, it would just compete with itself if we had something too similar. So that does happen a lot in publishing. Or sometimes we'll see 3 very similar books at the same time, not necessarily the same style or whatever, but maybe they'll all be kind of doing the same thing in a very general way. And that'll mean that we can only really choose to have one of them, simply because there's no need for a list to have 2, because buyers will be looking for one thing on that list. And we really want to get behind that specific thing. So, exactly like you said, it's not that something isn't good, probably most of the time. It's usually that it's just not the right place, the right time, the right people, with a lot of submissions, I will say. But if we're looking for a specific thing, we will either be kind of going to look for it, or maybe we'll say to agents who we work with, or it could even be that we've had submissions from authors and illustrators before, haven't been able to do a previous project, but loved their work, and have gone to them and gone, "You got anything on this?" So that happens too. So basically what I'm saying, anything can happen at any time from anyone, anywhere, and you never know anything at all. So...
exciting. It would be quite good to take a bit of a step back and just hear a bit more broadly about what your role is and what your part that you play in particular in the sort of journey of a book coming to fruition.
So I'm the editorial director at Flying Eye. So basically, I am in charge of everything editorial. So I work with our creative team, including our brilliant art director, Lily, who manages our designers. I work really closely with Sam, our creative director, who I mentioned earlier, and these guys, Kate and Hannah, and everyone else, to make sure that we have enough books, we have the right books, that the books have the right content, that we're choosing the right illustrators for them if they don't come with an illustrator to start with. I also edit the books, not all of them, luckily, or I would be a zombie. But I manage our brilliant editorial team too, and do art books. So I edit Detective Stanley. I also edit most of our picture books, and a bunch of our graphic readers, and then some of our nonfiction too. So that's basically, if you see a word, I probably was there. At some point. There's a lot of story development stuff that I work with, whether that's directly with the author illustrator or whether that's with the editor who's managing the project, or content development if it's nonfiction. And I'm also usually working with, like I said, the sales and marketing team to make sure that their needs are kept in mind at the same time as when we're curating the list, whether that's ensuring that we have the right cover, our art director and me will work really closely with these guys on that, whether we're bringing the right projects in, because I also manage our acquisitions team, and acquisitions meetings. So if stuff comes through to me and or Sam, we will bring stuff to our meeting, and I kind of manage that and try and keep it on track. Try aggressively. And move things forward to fill our lists, because we're not just working on this year and next year, but we're working on 2027 and 2028 and making sure that our schedules work and none of my editors and designers cry.
That's a very important job. So if we're specifically thinking about Detective Stanley, what does that process look like? So on the other side of the world, you've got an author and illustrator beavering away, creating a book. Are they finishing it in their mind and then sending it to you to look at, or are you seeing it earlier on in the process? How does that kind of work?
Every project works kind of differently. Hannah and Erica are so advanced and so experienced in what they're doing, and they know Stanley obviously so well, that their process looks kind of different to a lot of people's, but we do see things early on. So usually we'll see a 1-page kind of expanded blurb of what the story is going to be, and then I will comment and feedback on that. So we are we're coming kind of to the end of the second book at the moment, and already started to work on the third as well. So we're kind of doing a little bit of everything here and there the whole time. The characters and whether there's enough twists, whether there's what kind of mystery we're doing in this specific thing. We'll tend to comment on, can we think of anything to make this funnier? Or in my experience, I'll usually be like, can we have this silly pun that I've just thought of? Because I love Stanley so much. I think it's just it's so funny as a series. And we all have our own specific favourite characters that Erica draws so beautifully. So we will sometimes inject that kind of stuff too. And then they go away and I get a manuscript back and I might comment on that further. And then once that's approved, that can go to Erica. A lot of the time that would just go straight to our designer in-house as well. But because Erica also...
yeah, we spoke about that when I chatted with her.
Yeah, really, which is obviously not as normal as we would usually do it, but she has worked obviously as a designer before and knows exactly what these need to look like, and she works with our designers in-house and they also comment and go back and forth just like an editor would. So it goes to her to be typeset, and once that's done we'll check it at that stage too, make any suggestions we have, and then it goes to roughs, then it goes to colour. So we'll always be checking and giving our feedback at stages before we even get to the full drawn out stage, where we might make text changes later once we see the illustrations and think, maybe this needs to be explained more, or maybe this doesn't need to be explained at all because we can see it in the background. There can be stuff like that happens. So it's very, very back and forth, very integrated, despite the fact that, as you said, we live completely opposite ends of the and it's quite hard to arrange a call, but we do a lot of PDFs. And email.
And obviously you've got massive experience, and I'm sure that's what's playing into those decisions. At any point, not on a title by title basis, but I guess just in the broad work that you do, are you getting opinions from younger readers as well as to how they're reading it? I'm just thinking about to what extent adults can really know the child experience. And how do you approach that?
So, we do a lot of research. We read a lot of reviews, particularly reviews either from children or by adults talking about what their children experienced and liked. I'm also an ex-bookseller, so is Kate. Many years at Waterstones between us. And my entire editorial career, I've always kept in mind how aggressively, like, some of the things that adults say and some of the ways that adults treat books differ from the things that I would hear every single day in a children's bookseller. And I often try and frame that kind of stuff through that POV. Obviously, I also have friends who have kids that are across many different ages. And just when you see a child reading, like, I'm thinking about a friend of mine's son reading Detective Stanley, and actually our rights director's son was in here at Christmas reading it aloud, and it was genuinely so thrilling.
Yeah.
See it actually happen with something that is about to come out instead of reading the reviews some months later. So we do always try and keep in mind what's funnier to a child than maybe an adult. or that sort of thing.
Yeah. When I was talking to Hannah and Erica, both my sons read it with me, and we really enjoyed it. And I felt that kind of joy of what I think it does really well is that joy of being slightly ahead of Stanley. Like, you can see you see the clues, and that they really enjoyed that. Yeah. Smugness of knowing what was going on before he did.
The illustrations really help with that too, because obviously
exactly,
that's what we're able to do, is kind of hint ahead with a book like this, which is why this kind of reader is so brilliant. And it's quite nice to see that transition between picture books and graphic readers. And I think the other thing that I always think about, and I think a lot of editors will also think about, is the fact that, when we make illustrated books, and this starts at picture books, we're not illustrating what's happening on the page directly. It's not a reflection, a mirror image. We're having something illustrated that enhances the story. It's supposed to tell the story as a picture book. Yeah. And the text is together with it. It's basically, it's text and illustrations together, rather than making a whole... I have written down what is happening on the page, or I have illustrated what the words have said. Obviously there's some of that, but it really does need to. And graphic readers really, really take this and kind of move it a few steps forward. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And that's for me, when I'm looking at a comic, that's one of the things that I'm really looking for, in terms of like a quality marker, when you can see that the images are required to tell the story, and it's an equal partner in that. It's not just, comics are popular, let's whack this story in that form. Exactly. Yeah.
Can I jump in on that? Because I think also the studies recently by the NLT and by Scholastic are really supporting that, with kind of saying comics are helpful for reading comprehension, because when they do that in tandem, as opposed to just reflecting each other, they're building a further understanding of what's happening. I think that's a perfect point of what you said. It is a quality marker, because it's enhancing, although comics are 100% for enjoyment and reading for pleasure, there is still that value and that educational aspect, which is improving their reading comprehension. It doesn't just have to be through words, because pictures aren't, like you say, a direct reflection of the words. Both elements are adding more richness, more depth to the book.
Those layers of understanding, I think, are what make illustrated books so enjoyable and so helpful in comprehension and just reading in general. And one of my favourite things in all ages of illustrated books is on reread, like the reread value. Like, that thing, oh my gosh, I saw that thing the first time, or like, oh my God, I didn't think that was, oh my gosh, that super excitable, like, reread value is extremely important.
We're talking about reading. I think this is really relevant, and kind of developing reading. I'm really interested in that kind of positioning of the graphic reader and its audience, and how that impacted the choices that were made about the book itself. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so graphic readers are, I think, super, super important. I mean, we all know the kind of 5 to 8 reading category and what you usually see in there. These are illustrated books, but I think it's always you talking about, sorry, I'm pointing at Kate, and specifically with my eyes when I say this, always saying that, we teach children to read, and then, do you want to say, actually, because I'm stealing from you right now?
Jump in.
It's basically, you celebrate a child's ability to read by taking away their pictures, and it just seems an absolute waste. As we're saying, visual literacy is just as important. It's a very important stage for understanding. To then just remove someone's pictures, go, oh, well done, you can read, so now you just have the words.
Yeah, and it's like, well, now I don't enjoy it, because that was the thing. For some children, that isn't the thing that's really hooking them, but for some, it is the images that they get a lot of enjoyment out of. And then I think that is part of why we see a tail off in reading for enjoyment, in that as children get older, it's because the thing that they were enjoying has kind of been pulled away.
It's also a slightly easier transition from picture books, which is, what they will have been reading for a long time, into, the learning to read books that we all grew up with and see now in the phonics books. They're all full colour illustrated books. But then all of a sudden, if you ever want to read anything by yourself, it's like, okay, cool, now it's just a block of text and a black and white image. Obviously, there are some books in that market that have some colour images, but they're just kind of few and far between. And I just don't think that there's anything wrong with comics. No, we know that they're brilliant and they really improve interest and literacy, and it's a very good reason to give them to younger children. Now, the difference, I suppose, in the comics at this age, or the graphic readers, as we call them, is the amount of panels and the fact that we still have running text. So obviously it's not lots and lots and lots and super, super long, because it's still for ages 5+. But there is running text, and then there is also text in speech bubbles, and a lot to follow and a lot to see in the panels themselves. But I think that the panels also improve following the story and following everything that's happening visually as well, with the sequential understanding and the comprehension of the narrative. It's really, really interesting how graphic readers allow us to push that a little bit further without just having one image on a page and a block of text.
Yeah. And Kate, I'm really interested at what point you start thinking about, it sounds like it's right from the start that you're thinking about sales, choosing the right titles for retailers, and when does that all kick off? Is it right from that inbox moment?
So basically, we get involved from the acquisitions meeting. We read the material before acquisitions when Faye brings things along to meetings. From a sales and marketing and PR point of view, that's when we start to get involved. And at that meeting, it's very much a question of, right, who's going to read it? Who is the audience for this book? Which retailers will this work in? And you sort of realise over the years that actually your personal opinion absolutely is irrelevant, because what art style I like, what books I like, is who will read this, where will this sit? And luckily, I love most of the books, which does really help, let's face it. But, that objective sort of, where's this going to live? Who's going to love this book? And then from there on in, I mean, it depends how long the book is going to be, in production and when it's going to be published. But things really kick in about a year before a book's published, when we start, all the fun stuff of feeding bibliographic detail out to various websites and, Nielsen Bookscan and all that kind of thing. And then we sit down, make plans. We present at highlights meetings to the key accounts, to our sales teams around the world. So probably sort of a year to 9 months in advance, that's when we start talking about the books. Then that carries on forever, really. But that's the sort of time frame. When it comes to the independents in the UK, then they're seeing the books 2-3 months before publication. But yes, it's about a year out we start really getting involved and really testing things.
It's so interesting. I saw a definition. So I was working on some training about visual literacy for the National Literacy Trust, and I found a definition about a sort of a definition of picture books. And it was really interesting because it talked about, a picture book is an experience between an adult and a child. It's on the turn of the page, it's the quality of the image, but it's also a product. And I thought just putting that element in is really interesting, because there are obviously market forces at play and I remember talking to the commissioning editor David Fickling a few years ago for a podcast episode, and him saying that one of the big things that he felt had really helped their sales take off was changing the size of the book so that it could go on the shelf in Waterstones alongside chapter books. And how much are you thinking about those kind of things as well, and what limitations are set by the retailers that you want to sell?
Absolutely. I mean, will it fit on a shelf is a big consideration. We have seen trends over the past few years about, especially in illustrated non-fiction, the very, very large, more coffee table style books coming into play, and shelving had to be moved to accommodate those. But we're constantly thinking about things like that. Then it's about price point, perceived value, whether it should be hardback, paperback. All of these things come into play. But yes, fitting things on shelves is a very big thing. And again, as Faye was saying, being an ex-bookseller really does help when you are...
Yeah, I can see it from that perspective.
Absolutely. And just sort of how will a bookseller physically sell this in store? Where will it sit? Which section will it sit in? And I think it's really interesting, especially on sort of the graphic reader comic front, because obviously we're seeing them becoming more and more popular, and people are now beginning to have their own graphic novel bays, or looking at different age grouping and how you just sort of distinguish between age groups. So I think that's gonna be a big thing we're looking at, going forward, about how, if there is a specific section, how it fits in there, rather than sitting on a table in a fiction section.
Yeah. I noticed also in judging book awards that I think there needs to be some more understanding of terminology as well, because also like a lot of things being called graphic novels are non-fiction, and that's not a novel. And so, like I just think people are nervous about saying comics, but if we said comics it would be much easier, and then we could have non-fiction comics and fiction comics, and I think that's super. Sorry, I'm just going off on my own little tangent now.
I completely agree. It's that thing that basically probably what we need to do in publishing and book selling is all sit down and discuss things.
Can we just have a meeting about it?
Age grouping, it happens, with what age group is YA and things like that, and actually should come to some consensus across publishing about what does this actually mean, and how do we actually sort of talk about this.
Yeah, and I'm interested, about you mentioned about costs and things like that, and because I think that one of the things about Flying Eye titles, I feel like they're quite distinctive. I could probably pick one out of a lineup without knowing the book before, because I feel like they also have a sort of feel in the hand and the quality of the book. But I imagine these things come with a cost, and there must be this balancing point of making something that's really lovely and it being too expensive for people to buy.
Yeah, yes.
How do you manage that kind of tension, I guess?
I think the big thing we have to, and I think this happens with all colour publishers, is we have to look at print runs, and we work closely with our rights team, and we try and make large print runs by making sure we're the co-eds, and we're running the UK numbers, the US numbers, France, Germany are all running at the same time, so we can try and help that way, because our books are beautiful and they should be beautiful, and we're known for that.
Yeah, they are.
So we have to try, and that's how we try and accommodate things.
Book fairs, are these key moments for kind of the success of a title, or is it just something that's in the mix of the calendar and everyone just feels like they have to go now? What happens at these events?
So basically it's mainly from rights. They're rights fairs, so it's basically our co-eds team are going and talking to publishers around the world, selling the rights to our books so that we can create these large print runs. And it's a good way to see everyone face to face, to discuss what's happening in other countries, how their book trade is looking. You get some nice early feedback, because we're quite often going to these things 18 months, 2 years before the book's going to be published. So it's a really good way to get early feedback on the direction of the book, whether the art style is going to work for certain territories, that kind of thing. But it is, the food is brilliant if you want to go to Bologna, but we do sit there from 9 o'clock in the morning to about 6 o'clock at night, seeing different publishers for every half hour of the day, and you try and book in a time to go to the toilet, but sometimes that's not possible. You get into a role where you're talking about the same book so often that you can't remember whether you've already spoken about it to that. So as fun as these things are, it
sounds grueling, actually.
It is quite. And the other side of the fairs is for editorial, or for anyone in acquiring, is we're doing that from the opposite side, essentially. So I will be hot stepping it from hall to hall. I think the first year that I wore my Fitbit, which I don't have anymore, possibly because of this, to
trauma, I
did 27,000 steps just during the first day of the fair. I just took it off. I was like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Yeah. But that's literally going from hall to hall, because as Kate said, it's every half hour. So you try and do a 25-minute meeting, then use the 5 minutes to run to your next meeting. And when you're planning them in, you try and, I'm going to try and make sure that I see all of the French at the same time, because they're usually in the same place. And I'm going to see all the Germans at the same time, etc., etc. And it's up, down, and you're trying to take notes, see what's coming, and this is all to acquire for, licensing or for co-eds to do in translation, which, as I said at the start, we make most of our own books in-house. So in my Flying Eye, I have to do that a lot less. So I can spend a lot more time at the book fairs with Flying Eye seeing illustrators. So I'll see illustrators from all over the world. I'll see different art schools who come together. We'll be meeting people from different types of media companies, who might be interested in our books as well. So, it's, don't get me wrong, I'm never going to say, oh, gosh, it's so terrible having to go to Bologna. I'm not going to go that far, but it's not, I don't think I've ever seen anything in Bologna apart from the very specific restaurants that you go to with clients, specifically. Most of the meals are working meals as well.
Yeah.
And some pretty bad hotels.
Good insight there into the mysterious world. Hannah, I was going to ask you about marketing, because I'm guessing that the sales and marketing is also very interlinked. If we talk about Detective Stanley in particular, how did that plan come together, and what were your considerations for how you were going to market that book? Please, can we have some Detective Stanley merch? I can see him on all sorts of things. I'd like him on. I'd like. It's the next Miffy. I think I could.
Yeah.
I want everything in my house. Just about to get my kitchen done. I'd like some tea towels, please.
Love it. We are always pitching merch ideas that would bankrupt the company, basically.
It's the human dragon lady that won't give the people what they want. What we do actually as a sales marketing team, we all have a meeting once a month where we discuss campaigns that are a year ahead, and that's kind of our first conversation about what we want to do for that campaign. So in that meeting, we will look at, like Kate said, who the key audience are. So who are the customers that are going to buy the book, but then also which retailers are our key customers that are going to stock the book. And then from that, and from also the unique selling points of each of the books or the content in each of the books, we will then look at various parts of a marketing and publicity campaign. So that can include POS. So for Detective Stanley, we made some bookmarks, and the purpose of those bookmarks was, one, obviously to have a beautiful bookmark. Who doesn't love a beautiful bookmark? It gives bookshops something they can give away for free, either with a sale of the book or just in general, they can give away a bookmark for free, which is great because we don't always have the money to spend on a new book, and it's nice for a child to be able to leave a bookshop with something, even if they can't always leave it with a book. So it was to spread the word, it was to give bookshops a free promotional item, but then also what we did with that was we put book 2 on the reverse of the bookmark, so that everyone knew this was a series that we're really excited about. There will be a follow-up, so if they like it, they can keep an eye out for book 2. We also made some standees, so they were about A4 size, so that they could go on tables in bookshops or they could go in a window. And it's just something, again, for customers to spot in the bookshop, to draw their eye and to bring them to Detective Stanley specifically. And for that, we put Stanley on a plain blue background, because he does pop. It is quite Miffy, you are right. On a blue background with the title of the book, so that you've got the branding of the book and just a really engaging character. He's got his deerstalker hat on, he's got his magnifying glass, he's looking very Sherlock Holmes. It just attracts that audience, the children that love mystery books, the parents that know that their kids love mystery books. Yeah, so that's what we're doing with the POS. And then in terms of things like publicity, so we'll send books out to journalists, so those are people that work for big broadsheets, but also organisations like the NLT and SLA, who are helping get books into the hands of children, and also influencers and bloggers who are on social media. So as part of that meeting, we'll look at if there's anybody specific that we want to send to that we don't normally send to, whether there's a genre that we should be looking directly towards. And then also any potential events that we might do. Are the author and illustrator available to do those? So in this example, like you've said, Hannah and Erica are based on the other side of the world. It is quite difficult sometimes when there are huge time differences to get things moving quickly. We're really that we have sales distribution team in Australia and New Zealand, and HarperCollins New Zealand were great at helping us build events and publicity within New Zealand, because they have those contacts, they have those relationships. So that was great. They've painted a window in a lovely local bookshop today, which is gorgeous.
I love a painted window.
Yeah, it's also a picture. It's absolutely stunning. And there's stuff that they've made that's in behind the windows. They've also got slots in newspapers and things like that with interviews. So yeah, there's a lot that we discuss, and also we discuss social media, which I'm sure Helena will go into further. Yeah. But we discuss all of those ideas as initial ideas, And then as we get closer to publication date, we continue to develop these ideas until they come to fruition. And some of that is happening 9 months in advance in terms of when we're speaking to our sales teams in the US, in Australia, and in the UK. The UK comes a bit later than the US, or it can be 3 months before. We might make an animated trailer, which Helena worked on. I'm sure she can talk more about, to like reveal the cover, although I don't know if cover reveal is really the right word anymore because we know what the cover looks like, but it's fun. And yeah, all the way up to past publication, where we don't just publish the book and then go, oh, job done, that's it. We carry on talking about it. We might make activity sheets that we can share, or we might have Q&As with the... I'm treading on your territory, Helena, sorry.
It's all good. It's all good.
That's really interesting. And I suppose when there's a sequel, then that's also an opportunity to go back and revisit the first book. And Kate, would you be expecting the sales of the first book to kind of go up a little bit when the sequel comes out as well, as a kind of...
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. We would hope that would happen. When we do, when we publish book 2, we will be pushing book 1 as well to get people in at the start of the series and just carrying on with, the love for Detective Stanley. So yes, we would hope to see book 1 sales rise again.
Helena,
yes,
I've got a bit of a cheeky question here.
Oh, God.
Is it possible to have a successful book launch without social media?
Define success.
Come on, we're getting to the end of the podcast now. Let's not get too grimy.
I mean, ultimately, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, but I think in this day and age, you'd be slightly insane to leave out the social media side of things. Although it is a very interesting landscape at the moment, I feel, because there is such constant shift in terms of which platforms people are using, whether it's video content, whether it's static content, what people are gravitating towards, trying to please the algorithm, trying not to annoy the algorithm, etc. But I think the way we've approached this at Flying Eye, I think is really wholesome, which is it's all visuals forward and very much being about what Flying Eye is about, which is about making beautiful things rather than it necessarily being sell, which makes my job a lot more fun. But I think it also makes it a much softer kind of place to be, and for people to come and follow us and see what we're doing. You can come and follow along as an illustrator who might be a prospective creator, rather than just necessarily purely trying to sell things all the time, although that is technically my job. But but I do think it's very interesting, like keeping up with all the changes in social media and making sure that what we're doing is current but not gimmicky and will make a splash to our audience. Which is made up of a lot of people, really, because we've got kind of, obviously our fundamental audience is the children, but they're not
on social
the people
media
we're selling
directly.
to.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to go through, parents, which is kind of a different kind of content than, say, teachers or librarians or, we also, you have bookstores on there as well, which is really nice to have a dialogue with all the indie bookstores and promoting what they do as well. And they kind of, it's a nice mutual relationship there. I think the answer really is you can't have a splashy campaign that grabs a lot of attention without social media. But at the same time, I do think all of the things that go around that are just as important. Our newsletters that go out, our consumer newsletters, our newsletters that go out to the educators, which is kind of different content, because we do make a lot of content, free downloadable content for teachers and librarians that's on our website. And then again, like Hannah was saying, all the physical mail outs that go to our influencers and to various organizations with the physical product in it, which I think is super important because our products, like you said earlier, they're really beautiful. Yeah. And I think all of those special finishes, the holographic foiling and the sprayed edges and the, the little Easter eggs hidden. I'm a sucker for a sprayed edge. All of that, the end papers, all of the beautiful finishes. I think it's beautiful to get that out there. And we're a relatively small team. So that again feeds into the social content because we're passing it along to a huge network of people who are spreading the word for us.
Yeah.
Which kind of extends our reach, and, they can do all sorts of interesting things with their videography and their filmography, and also kind of slotting us in amongst other titles where other people might not necessarily have heard of us or have thought of us. And then things like events, having in-person author signings and all of those things where you kind of get a human face to who's behind the books. The human side of it, I think, is really important. And I think that's what social media is really good at, because, taking Detective Stanley as an example, Hannah and Erica are in New Zealand, but it's really fantastic that we can bring their live window painting to our base in London and present that to our audience, which is global, which is fantastic.
Interesting. You mentioned teachers and kind of resources for teachers. Through that social media lens, is that an audience that you're specifically targeting, or is that something that you try and do more through getting people to create their own content through like mailing out to bloggers and that sort of thing? I'm interested in how you tap into that audience, or is that maybe just not a significant audience for the social media side of things?
I don't know if it's the bread and butter of our social media following, but it's absolutely an active part of it. There's a lot of really fantastic primary school teachers who are very active on social media and do their own book reviews and kind of have their own sort of kidlit accounts, because they're obviously, immersed in it. Yeah. And they're really interested in it. When you have a book that really draws people in to create more material around it that can help it be used in the classroom. Because, it's interesting. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she's in reception, and this is my first year kind of seeing it happening live. But there's often books that are just trotted out year after year after year after year after year after year after year. And I can see why it happens. They're kind of staples. They kind of become classics, and teachers know how to teach them. And they're pressed for time. They're pressed for resources. So it's really nice when we're like, hey, we've got this new book. You really like it. Here's a whole beautifully laid out, organized teaching notes, lesson plans, activity sheets, coloring sheets, all the things that go with it to kind of, if it is something that is beautiful and eye-catching, it also makes it more accessible to the teachers in our audience.
I definitely think those sorts of resources are great for shifting that habit of going back to the same books, because really what's happening there is that, well, one, schools don't have budget to buy new books, but two, teachers also don't have time to completely reinvent their plans all the time. So giving teachers a starting point is a really important way of trying to add new and exciting texts into people's teaching practice, for sure.
Absolutely, because I do see that the books my daughter comes back with, a lot of them are brilliant, but a lot of them are very old, maybe a little bit dated.
But this is an issue. Where do parents, teachers, carers, where does anyone go to get recommended a new title? We see less coverage of children's books, and we can help as much as we can with visibility and word of mouth and resources, and going to conferences with librarians, etc., and sort of talking about books. But ultimately, people are going to go for books they trust, and those are things that they read when they were children, because we don't really, in the UK, have a big enough platform for children's books.
Yeah, this is very true. And I think it is quite easy to be in a bubble where you think everyone else knows. I've got a problem with books, definitely. We're just trying to move out of this part of the house so that we can renovate it, and there's a lot of books. It's an issue. But you get into this mindset that, of course, everyone knows about these authors and these titles, and really it's just your sort of bubble that you're in on social media, or, the world that you're kind of interacting with.
Completely. And I think that is also part of our job with social media, is to find those groups of people that there are lots and lots of influencers online, and there are lots of journalists that cover things that aren't books, but then also sometimes cover books that are to do with a certain topic. Although obviously they're not always our main concentration, because we can't go to them again and again with a book because they don't cover that content all of the time. It's really great to be able to include them when we find a book that is really relevant to them, because then we are spreading that audience, and that is something that, basically everyone that works in children's publishing, I feel confident speaking on behalf of all of the people here. I don't think what I'm about to say is controversial. Do it because they want children to read, because they want to make beautiful, wonderful books for children that children will enjoy and more children will read. So if we can reach more people, then that's really our job as a sales and marketing team. Faye and her teams have done the amazing job of making this beautiful book. It's our job to then go and find the people that want to read it and that will enjoy it. And obviously that's not every reader, not every book is for every reader, but I think, like you said earlier on in the conversation, there is that drop-off after we move on from picture books. And again, there are so many studies that show, I mean, this is old rhetoric. I feel like we all do know this, but sometimes it is good to be reminded that reading as a habit starts when you're a child. Continuing that on into adulthood is so good for everyone's mental health. It's really good for stress relief. It's good in general educational purposes, and that's not just non-fiction. I have a partner who is male and always feels like he needs to read non-fiction because he feels like he needs to consistently educate himself, and he's like, reading is for education, for learning new things. And I'm like, but you watch TV to enjoy yourself, so why don't you read a fiction book? And he has started doing that more recently, and he's like, I get through the book so much quicker. And I'm like, because it's fun. We really just want to spread the word about our books as far and wide as possible, not just because obviously as a business we need to sell books, but because that means that more kids are reading and more children are developing a love of reading that will become a habit when they get older. And that's just useful for so many reasons, for so many reasons.
Yeah, completely agree. This has been brilliant. Thank you so much. I've learned loads. So to end the podcast, I always ask guests if we were to add one comic or book, usually book about comics, but it could be anything, to our to be read piles tomorrow. What would you recommend? Faye, I'm coming to you first.
Oh, no.
I can edit out the long pause.
I've forgotten every book I've ever read. I don't know.
Okay, Kate, I'm coming to you first.
When I came to Flying Eye, everyone I was talking to was like, brilliant, that's a great place to work. Have you read the Alexis Deakin, Curse of the Chosen? And that's exactly what I did as soon as I got here. I was like, I'm reading that. It is amazing. So Alexis Deakin, Curse of the Chosen, it's 2 volumes.
That's great. I actually haven't read that, but I did a course at the Royal Drawing School about graphic narratives, making comics, and he was the tutor.
You lucky thing, he's amazing.
Yeah. I was in awe. Hannah, what would you recommend?
So it's a comic or a graphic novel rather, that I'm reading at the moment. So I haven't finished it, but I am really enjoying it, and it is beautiful. It's called Lunar Boy by Jess and Chin Wibowo, and it's a really lovely story about a trans boy who comes from the moon to live on an... I'm not 100% sure if it's a futuristic view of the current world or an alternative view of our world. But it's all about being a new person in school and dealing with that, as well as dealing with being trans and being included in some parts of their life, and also struggling with other bits of it. But it's just really beautiful, and it's in these gorgeous pastel tones. There's lots of things about people speaking different languages and adjusting to a new language, and there's lots of wonderful...
That sounds really good. And is it like a YA or adult, or what age range would you say?
I am looking at the information. It's 8+. According to
cool.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that one. I'm going to have a little look for that. Helena, what would you recommend us?
I don't know if this is a cop-out answer, but somebody has to say Rune, the Tale of 1,000 Faces, because, I mean, it is...
It's amazing.
It is, and it's also... award-winning. What can we say? It has just won the Waterstones Children's Book Prize Younger Readers category. But truly, it is the book that I I mean, I've really enjoyed lifting from it for socials because there's such beautiful, just straight up beautiful imagery in it. But I think it's just, I really love how it pulls so many threads in it, from, you know, the protagonist being deaf and the way it seamlessly has magic fused with sign language, but also she eats waffles and cookies, and it's funny, and it's, you know, I've gifted it to like 1 million children, but also I have a copy that I make my friends read as adults because it's just brilliant. So
yeah, I really love that, but I've just very recently read it, and I've already told at least 3 or 4 people about it, which is a good sign. Faye, back to you now. Have you had a time to scramble an idea together?
I was then going to say Rune, so thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's my fault panicking at the start, and I'm kind of split between saying a book that we published, a book that hasn't come out yet, but I'm very excited about. Very excited. We just got copies in. You're going to love the sprayed edge, or a book that's not biased. So I don't know. Can I say a few?
Go on. Shall we let you do all 3? Yeah, do all of them. Go on.
Oh my God, thank you.
Special case.
I'm reading just a book that's not biased. I'm reading Young Hag at the moment.
I love Young Hag.
It's amazing. It's just absolutely smashing.
The colours are amazing.
Love his Valkyrie book, and also Kill for an Arthur Legend, like smash perfection. Loving it. Really, really brilliant. That's great. Yeah. But we've already published Ditching Saskia.
Yes.
Also recently read that.
Okay.
But also really enjoyed it.
Okay, well, you should recommend me books because we have similar tastes. And I love Ditching Saskia because, as you know, you'll already know, it's an incredible, gorgeous story about, you know, grief and growing up and coming of age, and lots of different experiences that come along with that stuff. And I thought it was stunning, and it's a gorgeous book. And a book that hasn't come out yet that, like I said, you're going to love.
I'm leaning in.
For many reasons, including the sprayed edge, is a comic we've got coming out in August.
Yes.
Called Froggy. Do you see how I had to look to Caitlin to make sure it was August? The thing is, we sent it to print months ago. So I'm
interested. I was going to ask that earlier. How far in advance is the book actually in existence?
A while.
So, forget about it by the time it comes out.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're just waiting for the resurgence, because obviously we're constantly making 40-odd books. So yeah, that's a lot. But we did recently get copies in of Froggy, which is a brilliant, gorgeous comic about a young frog called Froggy, by Paige Walsh, and it's
so
just
cute.
The most delightful, beautiful. Like, it makes me so happy just looking at his face, and it's just so funny. Yeah, I love Froggy. So yeah,
that sounds great. I look forward to that. That sounds brilliant.
The best thing actually about Froggy is that in my professional career, I have now used, in very professional meetings, I have told people how cute Froggy's butt is, which I
we have a piece of you going, look at his butt. So cute. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I look forward to Froggy and his butt. What a good way to end the podcast. I would just like to say thank you so much, all of you, for all your time. You're very busy, important people in the book world. So thank you so much for giving up time to explain to listeners and to me about the process. I feel like I've learnt loads. And yeah, I'll definitely be looking at books in a different way when I pick them up and think about all the work that's gone on behind the scenes. So yeah, thank you for explaining that to everyone.
Thank you so
much.
Thank you for having us.
There you have it. Thanks so much to the Flying IT team for coming on the show. I loved having so many different voices, hearing about all the different elements of the publishing house and how it works with creators to bring books to us. Yeah, I found it really fascinating. I loved exploring that idea of social media, the role that influencers, teachers, librarians who share online have in bringing books to our attention. I think it's really, really fascinating. So yeah, lots more to think on and dwell on as I let that episode sink in. I'm sure I'll have more to think about and some ideas for future episodes from the back of that, because I did find it really, really interesting. My book recommendations, so many book recommendations. I can't believe I let the rules be bent so much on that episode. I was obviously in a good mood. I'm intrigued by Froggy and his cute butt, and it made me think of, I did treat myself recently to another frog-themed graphic novel because Froggy is not out yet. It's a bit of an exclusive book. It's gorgeous. It's a stunning object. We talked with the Flying Eye team about the kind of the pleasing feel of a book in your hand and the way it's made, the way it's bound, and all of how all of that plays in. This book is not a Flying Eye title. This book is called A Frog in the Fall and Later On by Helena and it is beautiful kind of pen and ink style illustrations of a frog and some toads on a journey. It's bound in the most stunning kind of spineless way. It's like a sketchbook. You're leafing through the pages of a sketchbook almost to explore this story. It's absolutely breathtaking. I'm not going to lie, it's not cheap. When I said I treated myself, I did. It was £40 to have this signed edition, which is a lot more than I would usually spend on a book, but I don't feel shortchanged. It is a really, really beautiful story, and the artwork is breathtaking in its minimalism and the way that it captures the characters. And seems like a weird thing to say, but frogs' bodies are cool. And the way that they're drawn as characters in this story is really, really incredible. So that's my frog-themed recommendation. Thanks to ALCS for sponsoring today's episode. As you know, we often have writers on Comic Boom speaking about their work, and ALCS is a not-for-profit organisation supporting its 120,000 plus members to collect money for all the secondary uses of their work, including things like photocopies, digital reproductions, even use in education. They produce some fantastic resources as well to support educators explore important and very relevant topics like plagiarism and copyright, and you can check those out on the link in the show notes. There's a range of different free resources for teachers available on the site, and I think especially in the age of AI, it's something we need to build children's awareness of. And they've also, just for your own reading, if you're really interested in AI and how that blossoming world of AI is affecting authors' views on the situation, and how we can put in better systems and processes, checks to protect their work and their own intellectual property. There's a really interesting report on the ALCS website about that, so I recommend that one if that's something that you're interested in. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting for this episode. There has been a few weeks longer than I expected, caused mainly by things like holidays and building work in my house, and it has thrown up the realisation that I was in fact right. It is going to be very challenging to run the podcast whilst the build work is happening in my house because it's so noisy. So we are going to now do as planned. We're to have 5 episodes and then a break, and then in the autumn term the other 5 episodes for this season of the podcast, and that'll be a lot smoother. You won't be left waiting for episodes to come out whilst pneumatic drills are going on. So that is the plan. So we're going to now take a little bit of a break for the summer. Thank you so much for your support on this mini season of Comic Boom. Such great guests in this season. I'm still really, really, really keen to have more teachers, more librarians talking about their work and their approach. We've got a librarian lined up for the second half of this season, but there's always room for more librarians. That is a fact. So if you're a teacher, an educator, a librarian, a youth worker, somebody working directly with children and young people using comics, I would absolutely love to have you on the podcast. You can contact me via any of the social media platforms that we're on. That is probably the best way to contact me, through the Comic Boom Instagram page at comic_boom_podcast. You can actually send a message through the podcast website as well. There's also Twitter at Lucy_Bradley if you want to find me on there. And then also we are now on Blue Sky too, or you can find me Lucy Starbuck Bradley on LinkedIn. So if you are an educator, a librarian, a youth worker, somebody working directly with children using comics, I would love to have some more direct examples on the podcast to share with people, because I think that's really, really important. But thank you, all of our guests from this mini-series. Thank you, all of the listeners, for supporting the podcast. It's been an absolute joy to come back this year, and looking forward to bringing you 5 more exciting episodes in the autumn term. Don't you be worrying about what you're going to listen to over the summer, because there are 50 plus episodes of you to go back in, dip back into of Comic Boom. Check out that back catalogue. There are some brilliant episodes. So dig back through and find something that you may have missed the first time round, or something that you want a little reminder of to get your inspiration flowing, and tune into those back catalogue episodes whilst we're on our break. Have an amazing summer. Look forward to connecting back up with you all in the autumn. You've been listening to Comic Boom, which is produced and hosted by me, Lucy Starbuck Bradley. Thanks for listening.